they still need to interact with each other, right? And so the first thing that we're going to talk about is the float property. This is probably the most commonly used property for anchoring elements on a page. This horizontally anchors an element basically on its row. So if you float elements to the left, it'll stay on the left side, and if you float elements to the right, it's going to stick basically onto the right side. And it also allows other elements to flow around the page. So I have an example down here of basically what a blue box floated onto the right would be. You'll see that the text is, able to flow sort of around it. And this was the original use case for float. I mean, when CSS first started, HTML was also intended to be, basically a document, right? So it was intended to basically float images around and let text go around this. But since then, float has been sort of co-opted to do other things. And those other things do include basically anchoring an element on its row. So one of the elements that we want to anchor is our large CSS3 badge. We want to anchor that onto the right like this. I know this isn't really pretty, but it does give you a good indication of what floating something onto the right would be.
Absolutely.
You'll also notice that there's some space right here between it and the right side. I'm going to show you what that would look like basically if I didn't have the margin there. Yeah, so this is my image, and right now I'm giving it a 10% margin to the right. That way it scales with the page size. If I didn't have that, it would just go directly to the right.
I gotcha.
So we're going to set a couple of things. We're going to set its float, and we're also going to give it a little margin so it doesn't float just on the edge. So in here, we'll say float right. And we're also going to do margin right 10%. Whoa, 10%. I need to find percent. Okay, great. And similarly, we want to set the left margin for our text to not be exactly on the right left edge of the page, but have a little bit of buffer. So I'm going to do margin left on this, and I'm going to do 10% as well, so it looks a little centered. And now, if we refresh our sort of demo, it'll go like this. Whoa.
All right.
What happened?
Well, we got halfway there, sort of, and then we made a mess of a few other things.
Yeah, and this actually happened because, well, this is one of those things where elements interacting on the page can do bad things. So right now, basically what happened is our hero block said, oh, wait, if you want to put it there and these are next to each other and this text is here, then this element is actually going to be too big to fit in our box. So basically, it floated it here and then it sort of stranded it outside of the box. There's a pretty good way of just making sure everything that you want inside of the box stays in there, and that's using the overflow property. So if elements sort of overflow from that div, the div will just simply enlarge itself to account for it, instead of simply saying, well, I guess you're out there on your own. So I'm going to say overflow auto, and that should take care of that.
Okay, so that'll automatically resize.
Exactly. Okay. So basically, it'll say if an element overflows our div, don't just leave it hanging. Bring it back in. We'll enlarge ourselves to keep it in here.
Okay. One of my favorite little tricks to do with the overflow is to use that scroll. So that way, rather than having to use iframes, you can just set up the div tag. It's got that huge block of text, and you just want scrollability inside of there. If you set that overflow to scroll, it'll automatically just put in a scroll bar inside of there, which is I think a neat little trick.
Yeah, exactly. So you can have a little text box with a scroll bar next to it, instead of having a huge chunk of text that would take up the entire page.
Exactly.
So I see this happening all the time. Like when you're buying new software, they're getting you to sign the terms and conditions. That's just they could be using an iframe, but most likely it's going to be an overflow scroll.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And now
those terms and conditions that everybody reads from start to finish.
Oh, I definitely do.
Yeah.
So one thing that I promised you guys I would do that I haven't yet done is I haven't fixed this sort of margin here that's happening with basically in the entire body of the document, and that's because body actually has some default padding and margin on it, and this actually does vary a little bit between browser to browser, but I don't know that I would ever want some space there. So generally what I do is I set margin of the body to just be 0. I want it to take up the entire screen, and I also want there to be no padding. So elements within the body just go from side to side exactly where I would expect it.
Okay.
And once I save that,
that does sort of make sense. I mean, that's the screen where it's displaying. Just give me the entire screen.
Yeah. Why would I want blank space there? I don't understand. But this is just across every browser essentially. But now that we've updated that, you'll see that it's now smooth here again. And the last thing that we want to do with padding is we actually want to pad probably each of these links. So it's not just one chunk of text together, but they actually have some padding left and right. And you can set padding for things for even inline elements if they're not only for block elements. So I'm going to go back in here, and you'll see I did this the descendant selector like we learned before for all, because all the list items within our header are going to be links. Link outs. So I just set it there instead. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do just some padding to the right. I'm going to set that to 20 pixels just to give it a little bit of padding. I'm not going to do left and right because all of them just can go 20 over.
Yeah, they would combine, and now you've got 40 pixels.
Yeah, exactly. And this is just much more exact. I don't want to have to divide it by half. And you'll see that now this is separated a little bit more. But now we also want these to be on the center of the page. I mean, everything else is sort of centered. It's nice to have things centered. And actually, what is interesting is that centering can, once you have inline elements, centering can happen to basically all of them. So we can center all of these links here, and we can center these inline block cards on boxes on the bottom using the same thing. And it's going to be text align. So I know that the boxes on the bottom aren't text, but that is how you indeed align them to be more centered.
So it's sort of like the reverse of the old color, where color is just for the text. Here you actually want to apply it to the element, and you're going to use text as the prefix.
Yeah, this is just a simple way to center your inline elements. There are other ways as well. People set the margins, but I find this to be fairly straightforward. So I'm going to set this. So I'm going to set the block. I'm setting the text align center not to the boxes themselves, but to the container of the boxes. So that everything that goes inside that container, which are all the boxes, are automatically centered. So I'm going to set that to here, and then similarly, I'm not going to set these, the header list items to be text align centered.
The entire header.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to set the entire header to be text align.
And while Helen's typing this out, one of the things that's worth noting is with the IntelliSense inside of Visual Studio is it will pick up if you happen to type in the middle of something. So if you forget that it's text align, if you just type align, text align will still show up in the IntelliSense, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's very useful. Because you might not always remember that it's text align to align some elements. So once we have that, now if we just refresh the page, you'll see that these elements on top in the header are, of course, aligned, but in the center. But also these are centered as well on the bottom. So now, once we minimize the page, I mean, they're always going to be sort of centered. They're not going to look very good, unfortunately, because as you can see, we still have sort of this off-kilter alignment there. And that's because we haven't actually told inline elements how to align themselves. You can so what we're going to do is we're actually going to say, okay, all of these elements in this box, or all of these elements, align yourselves according to the top. So basically, all you guys should start at the same top edge. So we're going to go in here, and then for each of these boxes, we're going to say top align. Top Well, let's see.
Vertical.
Vertical, yes. Vertical align, we're going to set vertical align to top. That's where I mix myself up. So once I set my vertical align to top, once we refresh this, you'll see that they're on the same row, which is great, except now they're kind of touching the hero block. And all that we need to do for that is we basically need to set some margin for the container that these boxes are going to be in. So if we go back here, in the modules block, next to text, or under text align centered, we just basically need to give this some margin. We'll just go margin top, 50 pixels or so. And once we jump back here and we refresh the page, we'll see that it has some margin here.
Okay, perfect.
So now this is already looking basically like this. You'll see that all of these boxes are text aligned on top, but because we set the sizes of all the boxes, they're still the same size. It's not pushed down a little bit because we said all of these boxes would be exact squares. Mm-hmm. So I hope that gives you a little bit of flavor of how to position all of these different elements onto the page. This is not, for the record, how I would recommend you build your own web page. I would definitely say you should put much more styling onto these pages.
Of course.
Or you can go for a framework like Bootstrap, mm-hmm. which actually does a lot of the centering, the pulling elements left and right for you as classes that you can call. And I think it's much cleaner. Yeah. Much cleaner than what we're doing here. Yep. But what I hope to show is how you can position those elements on your own, or mm-hmm. how you can modify the positioning of elements within Bootstrap if you're using something like that, or using another CSS framework.
And I really liked how you kind of started with just sort of, hey, here's a clean slate and everything kind of a mess, and add in a couple little properties, and then, okay, now I've got this here, I've got this here, I've got this here. And that really is sort of the typical development with CSS, is you'll go in, you'll add something, let's see how it looks, go in, add something, let's see how it looks, and kind of build that iteratively, that step by step. So
yeah.
I really dig that.
Yeah, I find that if you add too many properties at the same time in CSS, you just go in, it's a mess, and then you have to open your developer tools anyway to look at which properties should not be affecting it.
Exactly. Perfect. All right, well, are you hungry?
A little bit, yeah, I'm getting there.
All right, I'm hungry. What do you say we take a meal break and we'll come on back in about an hour? Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, we'll see you guys in about an hour.